Every single day, across the vast, rolling woods of the American Pacific Northwest, a quiet, invisible rhythm unfolds. From the edges of suburban neighborhoods to the deepest forest canopies, countless birds rise with the morning sun. They search for food, defend territories, raise young, and navigate a world filled with hidden dangers. You walk through local parks, mow your weekend lawns, and look up at the tree line, seeing thousands of wild birds living their lives. You see vibrant cardinals, darting robins, and the heavy wings of crows. They perch on telephone wires. They gather in distant treetops. They cross highways, rivers, and neighborhoods every single day. For most people, birds are among the most familiar forms of wildlife they encounter. Yet despite the overwhelming abundance of birds, you almost never see a dead one. Think about it for a moment. Millions of birds inhabit North America. Every day, somewhere, countless lives come to an end through age, weather, illness, or predation. And yet their remains rarely appear before human eyes. They do not lie in the open grass. They do not dangle from branches. They do not litter sidewalks. To the casual observer, it is as if they simply vanish from the world. For generations, people have quietly wondered about this mystery. Where do they go? What happens during the final hours of a bird's life? Why do their bodies seem so strangely absent from the landscapes they once filled with movement and song? The answer is not a single secret. It is a combination of instinct, intelligence, and the relentless efficiency of nature itself. But they do not vanish. They hide, they protect themselves, and in the case of the most intelligent species, they are remembered. This is the story of Corvus, the old patriarch. A massive, battle-scarred crow who ruled the highest canopy of Clover Ridge for more than 12 years. His dark feathers had weathered storms. His sharp eyes had watched generations come and go. Season after season, he remained a familiar presence above the valley. To the humans below, he was just another black shadow in the sky. To his flock, he was their king. Corvus was the living library of his territory. For more than 12 years, he had watched the seasons turn across Clover Ridge. He knew the first signs of spring long before the flowers emerged. He recognized the distant scent of approaching rain carried on Pacific winds. He understood the rhythms of the valley better than any bird in the flock. Young crows learned by watching him. Older crows trusted his judgment. When danger appeared, they followed his lead. When food became scarce, they watched where he flew. To many of the younger birds, Corvus had always existed. It was difficult to imagine the canopy without him. He survived the historic freeze of 2021, an event that claimed countless birds across the valley. While temperatures dropped and food became difficult to find, Corvus endured. He discovered sheltered feeding grounds hidden from icy winds. He located pockets of unfrozen water when many others could not. Those lessons were passed from one generation to the next. Long after the freeze ended, younger crows still followed routes he had established during those difficult months. He escaped red-tailed hawks with only a scar near his eye and taught generations of young crows how to crack walnuts using busy roads. From high above, he would watch vehicles pass. Patiently. Carefully. Waiting for the precise moment when tires would crush the hard shells below. Then, when the traffic cleared, the crows would descend to collect the reward. It was a behavior learned through observation and experience. And Corvus was among the flock's greatest teachers. He knew where water remained fresh during summer droughts. Even when streams narrowed and ponds began to disappear beneath the summer heat, Corvus seemed to know exactly where to go. Many younger birds survived difficult seasons simply by following him. He knew which backyards were safe and which hid dangerous outdoor cats. He recognized certain human faces. Some people left food scraps. Others chased birds away. A few posed genuine danger. Over the years, Corvus built a mental map of the entire territory. Every safe perch. every reliable food source, every hidden threat. This remarkable awareness was one reason crows have become known as some of the most intelligent birds on Earth. They learn from experience. They solve problems. They remember. And perhaps most importantly, they teach one another. Corvus had spent more than a decade doing exactly that. But even the wisest crow cannot escape time. As the years passed, the old patriarch flew a little slower than before. The long journeys required more effort. Winter mornings felt colder. Strong coastal winds felt heavier against his wings. The changes were subtle. Almost impossible for humans to notice. But Corvus noticed them. And so did the oldest members of the flock. Then one cold October morning, as fog drifted in from the Pacific coast, Corvus felt something change. The valley was unusually quiet. A pale layer of mist hung between the trees. Dew clung to branches high above the forest floor. Corvus sat motionless on his favorite perch and listened. The familiar sounds of the morning remained unchanged. Yet something within him was different. A heavy ache settled deep within his chest. His powerful wings felt heavier than ever before. Each movement demanded more effort. Each breath came slightly slower. The tiny furnace that had fueled his life for more than a decade was slowly fading. His time had come. Among wild animals, age rarely announces itself dramatically. There is no ceremony. No warning. Only a gradual realization that the body can no longer do what it once could. Birds possess a powerful instinct for survival through concealment. When they become weak, they do not remain exposed. Weakness attracts predators. Vulnerability invites danger. Even in their final days, many birds continue following ancient instincts shaped by millions of years of evolution. They seek darkness, shelter, and safety. Places hidden from the eyes of predators. Places hidden from the chaos of the world. Corvus understood this better than anyone. He had witnessed it before. He had seen older birds disappear quietly into dense cover. He had watched empty perches remain vacant after the passing of former flock members. Now, for the first time, he understood exactly why. The old king had spent his life protecting his flock. And in his final hours, he would follow the same ancient path that countless birds had followed before him. Perched on his favorite telephone pole, Corvus looked down at the neighborhood below. Morning light filtered through the fog as the valley slowly awakened. Cars moved along distant roads. Dogs barked behind backyard fences. A few early walkers followed familiar paths through the neighborhood. Life continued exactly as it always had. But for Corvus, this morning was different. For the first time in many years, he was not studying the landscape as its guardian. He was saying goodbye to it. From his perch, he could see the rooftops he had flown over thousands of times. He could see the towering Douglas firs that had sheltered generations of crows. He could see the winding creek that cut through Clover Ridge before disappearing into the woods beyond. Every corner of the valley held a memory. Every landmark reminded him of another season survived. For a long moment, the old crow remained still. Then he turned his gaze toward the distant ravine. Instinct was guiding him now. Not toward food. Not toward safety. But toward seclusion. If he collapsed in the open, nature's cleanup crew would erase every trace of him within hours. Cats, raccoons, possums, ants, and beetles constantly patrol suburban landscapes. The forest itself is filled with scavengers. Foxes move silently beneath the trees. Insects work tirelessly across the forest floor. Even microscopic organisms begin their work almost immediately. Nothing in nature remains unused for long. Most bird remains disappear before sunrise. What humans perceive as a mystery is often simply a process occurring beyond their notice. Nature wastes very little. The evidence vanishes quickly. The cycle continues. Using the last of his strength, Corvus left the pole. His wings opened against the cold morning air. For a moment, he looked almost unchanged. Almost like the powerful leader he had always been. But appearances can be deceiving. Each wing beat demanded effort. Each glide lasted slightly shorter than before. The strength that once carried him effortlessly across miles of territory was fading. Still, he continued. The old king would make one final journey. He flew low over garden hedges and fences, searching for one final sanctuary. Below him, sprinklers glistened on lawns. Children's bicycles rested beside garages. Bird feeders hung from porches where songbirds gathered. The ordinary scenes of everyday life unfolded beneath his path. No human noticed the significance of his flight. To them, he was simply another crow crossing the neighborhood. But this was not an ordinary journey. It was the final chapter of a life spent in the sky. As he moved farther from open spaces, the landscape began to change. The houses became fewer. The trees grew denser. The shadows deepened beneath the canopy. The sounds of civilization faded into the distance. Ahead lay the hidden places of the valley. The places few humans ever entered. The places where nature conducted its quietest work. Eventually he found it. A dense blackberry bramble hidden deep within a ravine. The thicket was nearly impenetrable. Twisting branches formed a natural barrier. Thorns guarded every entrance. Even large predators would struggle to move through it. For a bird seeking shelter, it was perfect. Corvus descended slowly toward the opening. His landing lacked the precision it once possessed. But it was enough. The old crow had reached his destination. He crawled through the thorny branches and settled into a small pocket of dry earth beneath the thicket. The air felt still there. Protected. Hidden. Above him, tangled branches blocked much of the light. The outside world became distant and muted. There the wind could not reach him. Their predators could not easily find him. There the constant demands of survival finally fell silent. For the first time in many years, Corvus had nowhere left to fly. No territory to defend. No lessons to teach. No dangers to monitor. Only rest. Outside, the forest continued its endless routine. Songbirds called from distant branches. Squirrels searched for food among fallen leaves. The wind moved softly through the canopy overhead. Life continued. As it always does. Slowly he tucked his beak beneath his wing. His breathing became quieter. The ache within his chest gradually faded. The struggle was over. Then, hidden from the world, Corvus slipped peacefully into the darkness. He died exactly as nature intended. Not in the open. Not beneath the gaze of predators. Not before human eyes. But within the shelter he had chosen himself. Invisible. And yet, although his body remained hidden, his absence would not go unnoticed for long. Because somewhere beyond the ravine, another crow was already searching for the king who had never failed to return. The next morning arrived quietly over Clover Ridge. Fog still lingered in the lower valleys, softening the edges of the world. Branches dripped with moisture. The air carried the cold calm of early autumn. Nothing about the landscape immediately suggested that anything had changed. But within the crow community, change is never missed. Corvus's lifelong mate, Lyra, noticed his empty perch. At first, it was only a detail. A missing shape in a familiar place. A silence where there should have been presence. Crows are unlike most birds. They remember faces, recognize individuals, and maintain complex social relationships. Their memory is not short-lived or instinctual alone. It is structured, emotional, and persistent. Lyra waited. She scanned the surrounding canopy. She listened for the familiar wing beats that usually marked Corvus's return. But the morning continued without him. Something was wrong. The realization did not come all at once. It built slowly, like gathering clouds before a storm. When it became clear, Lyra took flight. She moved across the valley with purpose, passing over treetops and familiar landmarks. Eventually she reached the highest branch of an old Douglas fir overlooking the valley. From there, she could see almost everything. The forest stretched endlessly in every direction. The ravine lay hidden beneath thick vegetation. The world below appeared calm. But Lyra knew better. There she released a low, rhythmic call. A summons. Not random noise. Not simple communication. But a signal shaped by recognition and urgency. It traveled through the forest like a thread pulling attention toward a single point. Within minutes, the sky began to change. First, a few distant shapes appeared above the tree line. Then more followed. Dozens of crows arrived. Then 50. Then nearly 100. They came from different parts of the valley. From river edges. From rooftops. From deep forest perches. Each one responding to something older than instruction. Something shared across generations. They gathered around the Blackberry Ravine. The same hidden place where Corvus had gone. But they did not arrive as a flock searching blindly. Their behavior shifted immediately upon arrival. They did not search for food. They did not fight over territory. There was no competition. No chaos. Instead, they performed what scientists call a mobbing response. A coordinated gathering often triggered by danger, death, or significant disturbance. The flock circled overhead, calling loudly and repeatedly. Their voices layered together into a dense, vibrating soundscape. They landed nearby on branches and fence posts. They tilted their heads. They observed. They assessed. They remembered. Some crows peered directly into the thicket where the old king rested. They did not descend. They understood the boundary of the place. For nearly 20 minutes, the forest echoed with their voices. The calls rose and fell like waves through the canopy. To human ears, it might have sounded like chaos. But within that chaos was structure. Meaning. Recognition. To them, this was more than noise. It was memory. It was learning. It was respect. A transfer of information carried through sound and attention. An acknowledgement that something important had ended. Eventually, the intensity of the gathering began to soften. The calls became less frequent. The circling slowed. One by one, the crows started to depart. Not in panic. Not in disorder. But in understanding. As if each bird carried away a piece of what had just occurred. When the last of them disappeared into the tree line, the forest returned to silence. The ravine remained hidden beneath its tangled cover. And below, nature quietly continued the process that had already begun. The forest does not pause for loss. It does not wait. It does not hold memory in the way humans do. It continues forward, guided by cycles that have existed long before observation or understanding. The location of a dead crow becomes a place of caution. Not marked. Not spoken of. But remembered in behavior. Crows often retain such locations in their collective memory for weeks or even months. They avoid them. They observe them from a distance. And they share that knowledge with younger members of the flock. In this way, the lesson spreads without words. The forest around the Blackberry Ravine slowly returned to its usual rhythm. The calls faded completely. Wings disappeared into distant tree limes. The sky above Clover Ridge became empty once again. Then, just as suddenly as they arrived, the flock departed. No ceremony marked their leaving. No signal announced the end. The forest fell silent once again. Below, nature quietly began its work, returning Corvus to the earth. This process is not dramatic. It is not visible from a distance. It unfolds layer by layer, beneath leaves and soil and shadow. Every part of the ecosystem participates in it. Insects break down what remains unseen. Small scavengers move carefully through the undergrowth. Microorganisms begin their silent transformation of matter back into soil. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is preserved for sentiment. Everything is recycled into the living system that surrounds it. Humans walking nearby never noticed. They passed through the valley without awareness of what had occurred just beyond sight. They simply wondered where all the birds go when they die. A question that has followed human curiosity for generations. A question shaped by absence rather than observation. Never realizing that a remarkable process had already taken place hidden among the shadows. The absence of dead birds is not a mystery. It is the result of millions of years of instinct and ecological design. A system refined not for visibility, but for survival. The dying seek shelter. Those who remain behind interpret absence as memory. And nature removes the evidence with quiet efficiency. Even in death, the bird remains hidden. But it is not forgotten within its own world. Its presence lingers in behavior. In caution. In learned avoidance. And in the continued movement of those who once followed its flight paths. But its story continues through those who fly on. Through every crow that crosses the valley sky. Through every call echoed across the tree-line. And through every silent flight that carries forward the lessons of those who came before. Somewhere above Clover Ridge, life continued as it always had. Unaware. Uninterrupted. Endless. And the forest, as it had always done, kept its secrets well. If this story changed the way you see the birds around you, leave a comment and tell us what surprised you most. And subscribe to Winged Mysteries for more hidden stories from the natural world that most people never notice.